Was Genghis Khan a hero or a villain? We have always heard that Genghis Khan was a ruthless warrior and ruler who invaded numerous countries and killed thousands of people. But how many of us actually know the reality behind this? Today, we will uncover the true history of Genghis Khan. The story begins with a 9-year-old boy named Temüjin, who was given the responsibility of choosing his future wife from a group of girls. His father advised him to select a girl who was fair-skinned, healthy, had a large face, small eyes, and, most importantly, strong and agile legs. His father believed that a girl with strong legs could double her husband's happiness. Soon, Temüjin found a girl he liked and took her to his father. However, his father was disappointed because he had hoped that if Temüjin chose a girl from their rival tribe, the Merkit, their long-standing enmity would turn into friendship. Instead, Temüjin fell in love with a girl from the smallest tribe, which complicated matters. But Temüjin was happy with his new bride. Before leaving, he gave the girl a piece of a crow's bone as a gift and promised to return in 5 years to marry her. As Temüjin, his father, and their companions were returning home, they encountered a powerful storm, forcing them to take shelter in a cave. The Mongols believed that storms were a sign of the gods' anger. Once the storm passed, they continued their journey but soon faced another challenge, a confrontation with a dangerous tribe. According to Mongol law, shedding blood near a water source was forbidden. Both sides stood cautiously, watching each other, until a man from the opposing tribe stepped forward with a bowl of milk as a gesture of peace. Temüjin's father reciprocated by sending back a cup of wine and a plate of dried meat. However, his companions, sensing danger, insisted on making a slave drink the milk first. Temüjin's father refused and, to show trust, drank the entire bowl himself. Little did he know that the rival tribe was deceitful. A short while later, as they continued their journey, Temüjin's father suddenly collapsed, poisoned, and died. Seeing this, a man named Altan laughed instead of mourning. Furious, 9-year-old Temüjin lashed out at him with his whip. But with his father dead, Altan soon rebelled and took over as the new leader of the tribe. Temüjin's mother tried to rally people to her side, but failed. She warned Altan that one day, Temüjin would become the next Khan and avenge his father's death. Among the Mongols, the title Khan was given to the leader of all tribes, and it had no connection to the Muslim community. Upon hearing this, Altan decided not to let Temüjin grow up. However, according to their customs, killing a child shorter than a cartwheel was considered a sin. Temüjin was just below that height, so he was spared for the moment, but Altan vowed to return in a few months to finish the job. Realizing the danger, Temüjin set out on a perilous journey toward the sacred mountains, seeking divine protection. However, the freezing cold overwhelmed him, and he collapsed onto the icy ground. Just then, fate intervened, and another boy appeared, saving his life. The two soon became friends, talking at length about their dreams. They performed a ritual sacrifice with a few drops of their blood and became blood brothers. Their shared goal was to rule the entire nation and, eventually, conquer other lands. But Temüjin had no idea that this very blood brother, Jamuka, would one day become his greatest rival. A few days later, Altan's men captured Temüjin and brought him back to the tribe. Once again, he had not grown taller than the cartwheel due to malnutrition. Enraged, Altan ordered that Temüjin be fed meat and fish so that he would grow strong enough to be killed later. Temüjin silently observed Altan, but the seed of revenge had already begun to take root in his heart. After Altan left, heavy rains began to pour, and all the guards rushed into their tents for shelter. Seeing an opportunity, Temüjin made his escape, running away with his chains still attached. Temüjin kept running without stopping until he reached the sacred mountain. There, he bowed his head and sincerely prayed to the gods to free him from his chains. Within moments, a wolf appeared, its sharp gaze seeming to peer straight into Temüjin's soul. But he felt no fear. Soon, by divine will, Temüjin's chains broke, and he was freed. Years passed, and Temüjin grew into a strong young man. However, Altan was still thirsty for his blood. Meanwhile, Altan's own tribe was suffering because of his cruel and oppressive rule. Now, Temüjin was determined to reclaim his rightful place as leader. But, before that, he had to fulfill his promise to marry Borte, his betrothed. When Temüjin reached Borte, he had neither wealth nor a home to offer her. Yet, She did not reject him and happily agreed to marry him. Despite his strong and imposing appearance, Temüjin found himself shy in Borte's presence. After a long journey, Temüjin and Borte finally reunited with his mother. She placed a family heirloom necklace around Borte's neck, and as a wedding gift, Temüjin took a luxurious fur coat from the bridal dowry chest and presented it to her. With that, their marriage was complete. But just as they were about to enter their room, the leader of the Merkit tribe and his warriors stormed in. They claimed that Borte belonged to them because, years ago, Temüjin's mother had been taken from the Merkit tribe. Now, by abducting Temüjin's wife, they intended to settle that old score. Temüjin and Borte knew they couldn't fight off so many soldiers alone, so they decided to flee. However, during their escape, Temüjin was struck by an arrow. Realizing that her injured husband couldn't outrun their pursuers, Borte made a heartbreaking decision. She whipped Temüjin's horse, sending him speeding homeward, while she surrendered herself to the Merkit warriors. She was then taken away and forced to become the Merkit leader's wife. Desperate to get his wife back, Temüjin decided to seek help from his blood brother, Jamuka. As a gift, he offered him the precious fur coat, the only valuable thing he had left. He pleaded with Jamuka to help him rescue Borte. However, according to Mongol law, men did not go to war over women. Jamuka dismissed Temüjin's request, saying, "You can find many more wives. Why are you obsessing over just one?" But Temüjin was unwavering. He kept persuading Jamuka until, at last, he agreed to help. However, Jamuka insisted they wait before launching an attack. He had recently become a tribal leader, and not many warriors were willing to fight for him yet. With no other choice, Temüjin had to be patient. Months passed, and when the time was finally right, the two brothers gathered their armies and set out to attack the Merkit tribe. As they rode through the rocky hills, an eerie silence filled the air, making Jamuka uneasy. His instincts proved correct. Hundreds of Merkit warriors were hiding behind the rocks, waiting to ambush them. Suddenly, the enemy struck with full force. The Merkit soldiers, wearing skull masks, fought ferociously. But Jamuka's army was equally fierce, and a brutal battle began. The soldiers stood their ground, fiercely battling their enemies. Jamuka drew his sword and, with its razor-sharp edge, began cutting down foes as if they were mere vegetables. Taking advantage of the chaos, Temüjin slipped into the Merkit camp, searching desperately for his wife. When he finally found Borte, he was struck with shock. She was pregnant. There was no way to determine whether the child was his or not. Yet, despite this uncertainty, he chose to accept her. The moment Borte saw Temüjin, she ran to him and embraced him tightly. Just then, Jamuka arrived, and Temüjin introduced Borte to him, proudly declaring, "My son is on his way." That evening, they celebrated their victory. During the feast, Jamuka offered Temüjin the position of his general, asking him to stay and fight by his side. However, Temüjin declined. He had a greater purpose to fulfill. Later, when they divided the spoils of war, Jamuka took the majority for himself, leaving only a small portion for Temüjin. Among the remaining items, Temüjin's soldiers discovered a fine sword and presented it to him. When asked how he wished to distribute the rest of the loot, Temüjin did something unexpected. He gave away all of it to his warriors, those who had fought alongside him. He even set aside compensation for the families of the fallen soldiers. Instead of keeping the sword for himself, he gifted it to his most skilled warrior, further winning the loyalty and admiration of his men. This generosity and sense of justice would later make Temüjin the greatest Mongol ruler in history. But as they say, two lions cannot rule the same territory. The next morning, Jamuka discovered that Temüjin had left without a word. To make matters worse, two of Jamuka's most capable soldiers had also left with him. Furious, Jamuka mounted his horse and set off in pursuit. When he caught up with Temüjin's caravan, he confronted him, demanding to know why he had left without saying anything, and, more importantly, why he had taken his men. But Temüjin had no intention of sending them back. They had come with him of their own free will. Seeing this, Jamuka's younger brother grew enraged and drew his dagger, ready to attack. But Jamuka stopped him, telling him to stand down. Though he was deeply offended by Temüjin's actions, he chose to let him go. And thus, the seeds of their rivalry were sown. Months passed, and one day, Jamuka's younger brother infiltrated Temüjin's camp, seeking revenge. He was attempting to steal Temujin's prized war horses when the Mongol guards spotted him and shot him down with arrows. Realizing the gravity of their mistake, one of Temujin's soldiers fell at his feet, pleading for forgiveness. The soldier even offered to be executed and have his severed head presented to Jamuka to maintain peace between their tribes. Temujin was torn. His warrior had not acted out of malice. He had simply been doing his duty. Meanwhile, Borte reminded him that he had always lived for his people, but if he handed over his own soldier to Jamuka, would they still respect him as a leader? Hearing these words, Temujin's eyes were opened. On the other hand, when Altan heard about Jamuka's brother's death, he seized the opportunity to fuel Jamuka's rage. Now, blinded by vengeance, Jamuka swore to avenge his brother's death, no matter the cost. Altan joined forces with Jamuka and declared war against Temujin. For Temujin, protecting his people was the top priority, so he ordered the women, children, and the elderly to move to a safe location. Before parting ways, his wife gave him a keepsake and prayed for his safe return. Now, Temujin and his army faced an enemy force 20 times their size. Despite the overwhelming odds, not a single soldier abandoned him. At Jamuka's signal, the battle erupted into chaos. The enemy launched a fierce assault, but Temujin's warriors stood their ground, fighting valiantly. However, one by one, his brothers in arms fell before his eyes. Rage boiled within him, but soon, he found himself surrounded by enemy soldiers. This was the first, and the only, defeat of his life. Despite winning, Jamuka, remembering their old brotherhood, chose not to kill Temujin. Instead, he sold him as a slave to a merchant. Thus, Temujin was taken as a slave to the lands of the Xia dynasty. As soon as they crossed the border, the local general noticed Temujin and recognized him. He decided to purchase him, despite a Buddhist monk warning him not to. The monk advised that this was no ordinary man and should not be enslaved, but the general ignored the warning and bought Temujin for just 5 coins. Instead of killing him, the general locked him inside a dog cage, subjecting him to constant torture. But what he didn't realize was that this mistake would one day lead to the downfall of his entire kingdom. The truth was, this enslaved man was destined to build the greatest empire the world had ever seen. Temujin was treated worse than an animal. The people of the palace mocked him, barely fed him, and even the royal dogs ate better than he did. Yet, he remained calm and observant, carefully studying everything around him with his sharp, narrow eyes. A priest had been watching all of this. One day, he approached Temujin, apologized for his suffering, and made a request. When Temujin eventually conquered this land, he should spare its temples. The priest knew what the future held. Temujin didn't respond. Instead, he placed the keepsake given by his wife into the priest's hands and asked him to deliver it to her. Determined to protect his faith, the priest embarked on a long journey across the scorching desert. However, before reaching his destination, he succumbed to the relentless heat and perished. At that very moment, Borte suddenly awoke, feeling a strange sense of unease. Trusting her instincts, she set out with her child in search of Temujin. Along the way, she discovered the priest's lifeless body, still clutching the keepsake she had given to her husband. She realized at once, Temujin was still alive. Wasting no time, Borte stopped a passing caravan and traveled toward the Xia dynasty's kingdom. After several long years, she was finally reunited with her husband. But the man before her was a shadow of his former self. Starved and weakened, Temujin's body had shriveled, and his skin, exposed to the harsh sun and winds, had turned rough like tree bark. Tears welled up in Borte's eyes, but she knew there was no time to grieve. As night fell, she reached for the silver coins she had brought. By bribing the guards, Borte managed to secure Temujin's release. At last, he returned to his homeland, hoping for a brighter future. But the once lush Mongolian lands had turned barren, ravaged by years of relentless warfare. Determined to reclaim his destiny, Temujin climbed the sacred mountain once more to pray to the gods for divine strength. At that very moment, the same wolf he had encountered 10 years ago appeared before him. Right then, Temujin swore an oath to build the greatest empire the world had ever seen, and within the next few years, he did just that. Warriors from distant lands flocked to his side, and soon, his army had grown to 10,000 strong. He had now become the biggest threat to Jamuka. Even though Jamuka's forces were twice the size of Temujin's, and they were ready for battle by the Jam River. Temüjin felt no fear. He had unwavering faith that the gods were on his side and that no one could defeat him. In a sudden move, Temüjin ordered his army to retreat. Seeing this, Jamuka's forces rushed after him, only to walk straight into his trap. In that moment, Temüjin's archers emerged and unleashed a deadly rain of arrows upon the enemy. Within just 15 minutes, one of Jamuka's battalions was utterly wiped out. Enraged, Jamuka commanded his troops to launch an all-out attack, and they charged like a mighty tidal wave. But just then, two dark clouds collided in the sky. Temüjin took it as a sign. The gods were with him. As his army advanced, the clouds thickened, and thunder roared across the battlefield. The sheer force of the storm terrified Jamuka's warriors, causing them to scatter in panic. At that moment, only one warrior stood unwavering in the midst of the battlefield, Temüjin himself. As he drew his sword, its blinding gleam made his soldiers feel as though the gods themselves had come to protect them. Fueled by this divine energy, they surged forward, cutting down their enemies with unrelenting fury. At last, Temüjin emerged victorious. He was now the undisputed ruler of the Mongol Empire. According to tradition, all enemy soldiers and prisoners were to be executed after battle to establish the victor's dominance. But Temüjin did something no one expected. He spared them. Not only that, he welcomed them into his own army. His generosity and new laws won the hearts of the people, and his reputation as a just ruler spread far and wide. When he returned to his camp, he finally came face to face with Jamuka. Despite everything, Temüjin had never considered him a true enemy. So, instead of punishing him, he set him free. By the year 1206, at the age of 44, Temüjin had unified the entire Mongol Empire. Wasting no time, he led his army to attack the Xia dynasty. But he hadn't forgotten his promise to the priest all those years ago. True to his word, he spared the temples from destruction. With an army of 300,000 warriors, he waged war on surrounding kingdoms, expanding his empire far beyond anyone's imagination. This was the legend of the Mongol Emperor, Temüjin, better known to history as Genghis Khan. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like and subscribe. See you in the next one.